If you were to hold me up at knife point and tell me that I had to get rid of every single category of knives except for one, I would immediately respond with two things. The first would be, hey, that's a cool knife. And then the second thing would be utility knives, without a doubt, hands down. These are the knives that I would keep above all. Now, if you don't have any utility knives in your kitchen, or maybe you have one and you haven't really been putting it to use because you're so used to using the santoku or various types of chef's knives, then listen up, because I'm telling you, this video is going to completely transform how you do your everyday prep in your kitchen with knives. And if you've been using paring knives forever and they're your go-to everyday prep knife, then I'm going to almost challenge you to get a utility knife, because I promise you that everything that this can do, these can do better. What's up, y'all? I'm Chef Brandon with Cutlery and More, and I've been collecting knives for well over a decade, many of which, as you can see, are utility knives. Now, my first utility knife was the second or third that I ever got for myself, and going from my big 10-inch Zwilling Pro to this Shun Honesuki, or Shun prep knife, was a complete game changer. And I quickly realized that I could almost prep an entire, actually no, I could prep an entire Thanksgiving dinner with just this knife. I think the category of utility knives, depending on the shape and the size, is one of the most versatile because of their ability to essentially do the things that so many other knives can do. If you've got shapes that are more like this, then you could easily substitute these for a santoku or a chef's knife. Meanwhile, if you have a straighter, thinner blade like some of these, there goes your boning knife, your fillet knife, your steak knife. The list goes on of all the other types of knives that these utility knives can nearly duplicate. And when I say utility knife, I'm not talking about the box cutter style razor blade knife that you would keep in the garage. I'm talking about kitchen utility knives that are also referred to as prep knives or petty knives. Okay, let's talk about some of the traditional characteristics of utility knives. This is a paring knife which ranges in its length but generally doesn't exceed 3 to 3.5 inches. Once you get into that 4+ inch blade length, that's when you're getting into the category of utility knives. Now, in addition to the average blade length of utility knife being in that 4 to 6 inch range, I would then say that there are two categories of utility knives, which is going to be completely based off of the size of your hand. So the first one would be where there is no knuckle clearance because the blade itself is very close to the handle. It's basically an even up and down type of shape. The next would be a blade that has more of a triangular shape that provides knuckle clearance, so that when you are on the cutting board and you're tap chopping, push chopping, or anything like that, your knuckles aren't gouging into the cutting board. However, there are blades that have a triangular type of shape where the heel definitely sticks out further, but depending on the size of your knuckles, you're not going to have any blade clearance. And the curvature of the tip of the blade with that more triangular shape can also determine if you're able to use this without your knuckles gouging in. Now, if I were to come down straight like this, they're gouging in, but if I'm using the tip of this knife, now my knuckles are elevated ever so slightly. So keep that in mind. You're gonna have two different categories, and it's really gonna be based off of how you personally are going to use a utility knife. Now, as you can see, I have a variety of different types of blades and finishes and steels. I've got your traditional Wusthof over here, the German Western style, all the way to some of the harder steel, finer blade Japanese Honesukis or prep knives. And then we have a variety of different blade finishes from Damascus to polished and everything in between. So all the different unique characteristics that make up different knives you can find in a prep knife. It's really going to be based off of your personal preference as well as how you look to maintain and take care of the knife. I'm telling you, this Yoshikane is going to be very, very different when it comes to maintaining it and sharpening it than this Zwilling. All right, that covers the basics of utility knives. Now let's put these to work so you can see them in action and understand how different blade shapes are best for certain cuts. The first type to cover would be straighter utility knives that vary in their length, but for the most part resemble a paring knife. Now, depending on the blade and the type of steel, these may have some flexibility, like you can see this Zwilling does, compared to this Enso, which is a harder Japanese steel that also has a thicker spine that goes down pretty much to the tip of the knife. Now, what's great about a utility knife with some flexibility is that you could use this to fillet fish. What's also great about this style is that they could easily do the work that the majority of boning knives do. One of the things that people are used to using paring knives for that a utility knife can easily replace is where you are trimming fruits and vegetables, where you're bringing the blade towards your thumb, say to remove the base of the stem of a Brussels sprout. This style of utility knife is also great for a simple slice. Again, a lot of folks use a paring knife to remove the base of the stem of a tomato. Well, for a utility blade, all you have to do is just choke up further on the blade and you can get it right out. I eat tomatoes almost every day, and this is where a utility knife is great because when it comes to just simply slicing a tomato, I can do this with a very small, nimble knife. And from here, I can go on to slicing up some pickles, my sandwich in half, just simple tasks that are great to use a smaller knife for. Now, most of us are not supreming lemons on an everyday basis, but if you need to, I would recommend using the more narrow utility knife, unlike the larger Honesuki with more of the knuckle clearance, because the thinner blade allows you to get a better curve type of cut when you are doing a citrus supreme. Meanwhile, if you just need a wedge of lemon for your cocktail, easy breezy. It's great. Some of the other utility knives that have a little bit taller of a blade are also really great to use for everyday slicing. But let's say that you want to be able to do a little bit more of a tap chop type of motion and you only have a knife that doesn't have a lot of knuckle clearance. Well, if that's the case, then all you have to do is pull the product to the edge of your cutting board, because now look, my knuckles, there's nothing for it to hit. And this is where you can go into that push chop or tap chop type of motion. The Yoshikane. Let's say you're making chicken salad or something else you're adding a little bit of a sweet crunch to, and you just don't need your big chef's knife for any type of julienne or finer knife work like this. Well, these prep knives, utility knives, are perfect for this type of job. Again, for a knife that doesn't have as much knuckle clearance, if you want to slice up some mushrooms, all you have to do is keep your blade angled upward like this so that your knuckles aren't rubbing on the cutting board. Or you can bring it back to do the tap chop. Now, this Damascus Zwilling Tanrei is very close to giving me the perfect knuckle clearance, but if I just angle the blade a little bit and I'm using more of this first, say, third back of the knife, then I can get away with the tap chop without crashing my knuckles into the cutting board. I have an oddball in my lineup here. This is a steak knife by Wusthof. This is their utility knife. You can see that the blade shape is very, very different. Now, you can still use a steak knife for primarily slicing, because the curvature of the blade there, it's just gonna be much better for slicing compared to something that's straighter. But if you have a set of these knives and they're collecting dust because you only use them for special occasions or when you have steak once a month or once a week, whatever it may be, then you know what? Go ahead and grab this and use it as a prep knife. Now, when it comes to basic prep, I prefer to have a utility knife that has a straighter, flatter curve to it instead of this upward sloping steak knife. So for something like broccoli prep, coming in here and trimming this up is a lot easier. And you know, a lot of people throw this part away, but there's still a lot of usable product there. Nailed it. So you just come in here, cut this down thinner, and all of this is totally edible. Now, let's say I was doing chicken and broccoli. I could easily slice up some chicken. I could trim pork loin. Heck, you could even use this to trim up a brisket. Although a curved boning knife is definitely better for something big and bulky and with different layers to it like a brisket. But I'm telling you, you can use these prep knives for nearly any type of protein prep, especially if you're getting larger roast or larger cuts of meat. Now, let's say that you want to be able to use a utility knife very similar to how you would a santoku or a chef's knife. These utility blades that are the more Honesuki style or Ko-Bunka or anything with this type of triangular blade with the knuckle clearance can nearly do what a santoku or even a smaller chef's knife. This is a 6-inch Wusthof. It basically replaces them for everyday simple prep, or if you want to be able to use a knife that's smaller the same way you would a regular chef's knife that you can do a tap chop with. Even if you want to get a little rock chop going, it'll work with these more triangular style blades with the knuckle clearance. Oh, and if you're curious, I'm going to be making a Brussels slaw. That was the Shun Honesuki. Now we've got the Enso Ko-Bunka. Now, I probably eat more onions, tomatoes, cucumbers, mushrooms, carrots than anything else, so I'm really used to using utility knives for that type of prep because I do it so often. Now, what I'm gonna do here is just go down the line with a couple of these prep knives and do a julienne at the edge of the cutting board. So this is the Enso straighter, but again, at the back here. Works like a charm. This is the Wusthof classic prep knife that has a Honesuki type of vibe. A little bit more knuckle clearance, a little shorter in length than some of the other ones here as well. The Yoshikane. This is the Mac. The Enso Ko-Bunka, which has more knuckle clearance, so I can come up into the normal center of the cutting board. And the Moritaka Honesuki. This is an absolute beast of a knife. This is a traditional Japanese boning knife, the Honesuki. It has a very, very thick spine. There is no flex to this. a real full-bodied handle that is either partial or stick tang. It is blade heavy, but it's very light in the handle. The size of this you could use for the rock chop. The tip is phenomenal for trimming meat, and because of the sturdiness of this type of blade, if you need to pop and kind of twist a little bit between joints or to pop cartilage out, then this would be totally fine compared to some of the more delicate knives that I have here. Now, what's also important to understand about the Japanese to German or Western styles is the brittleness of the blade. Now, although Japanese knives are made with a harder steel, that makes them actually more fragile when it comes to like scraping motions or twisting motions. For example, let's say that you've got yourself an avocado and you want to remove the seed. I'm going to go for a more Western style German knife that I can and twist a little bit here, because the softer steel, it's more forgiving, and I'm not going to have to worry about the edge chipping or cracking compared to some of the more Japanese style utility knives. I will be caramelizing these onions with a little bit of rice wine vinegar, salt, thyme, and hot honey, which will be an awesome pizza topping for this weekend. All right, the last ingredient I've got here to do some prep work with, and let's go with just this classic Zwilling, little bit of flex there for cleaning these strawberries. One of the things that's really great about these thinner utility knives is they're really good for off the cutting board type of work, especially when you are bringing the blade towards your skin. That knife will do. The Zwilling Tanrei does the trick. The Shun Honesuki and the Mac. Notice that with the Shun, I was going more in that push or up and down tap chop, whereas the knives with less knuckle clearance, I'm angling up and doing more of a slicing motion. I'm just gonna finish up my tomato prep here for sandwiches this afternoon and dinner tonight. Well, my wife is going to be happy, and I'm pretty happy too, because I got a lot of my prep done for lunch this afternoon as well as dinner tonight. And I did this all with utility knives. And not only did I do it with the style of utility knife that I personally prefer, with that knuckle clearance so I can do the tap chop, a little rock chop, pretty much anything with, but I also did it with some of these more narrow utility knives that don't provide a lot of knuckle clearance, but are great for slicing or doing a tap at the end of the cutting board. So as you can see, these are incredibly versatile knives that can do a lot of the things that other knives like a fillet or boning, chef's knife, santoku, and others can do. And they're small, they're nimble, they're easy to use, and you don't have to get out the big chef's knife or even a big slicing knife when you can go ahead and just grab a utility knife that's easy to work with, easy to clean, and doesn't take up a lot of space on your cutting board, on your counter. It's just an easy knife for everyday prep. And this is why, if I had to only choose one category of knives, it would be utility knives. All right, I'm Chef Brandon. Thanks for joining. I'm gonna go put my ingredients away and make some lunch. Take care.